Ladies and gentlemen, it's your host, Matt Zahab. We are buzzing as always and still coming in hot from lovely Mexico. Super pumped to have today's guest on the show, and we are going to discuss a wide array of topics today. This guy is a crypto goat, and we've been fighting to get him on for a while. We finally have him on, rather. Get your popcorn ready. This is going to be an absolute treat. Time for the intro. Today we have Georgios Vlachos on the show today, co-founder of Axelar Protocol and director at Axelar Foundation. He received his BSc and MS Engineering in Computer Science at the one and only MIT. After he graduated, he became a part of the Algorand founding team, where he worked on the design and development of the consensus protocol and other core components. And while in high school, he was the first Greek lad or lass ever in the world to win the gold medal at the International Mathematical Olympiad. That is absolutely wild. Georgios, welcome to the show, my friend. How you doing this lovely, morning for me and afternoon where you are in Dubai?
Matt, thank you so much for having me. Yeah, I'd normally be jealous that, you're in Mexico, but weather is getting pretty good in Dubai, so very happy to be here and, excited to talk with you in the community.
Me as well, man. Me as well. Before the show, you and I were shooting the shit a little bit. I was just telling you how I'm going to be in Argentina in a couple weeks, which I'm super excited for, not only to enjoy, of course, the beautiful architecture, the currency arbitrage, which isn't that much of an arbitrage anymore as things have gotten quite expensive in Argentina. Of course, the beautiful Malbec red wine and the steaks. My apologies to any vegetarians listening to this, but I am a huge meat eater and I love a good steak, and I will be eating steaks every single day in Argentina. And on top of that, we're going to be doing some boots on the ground, really good journalism, and we're going to show you guys how Argentina actually uses crypto in their everyday lives, which I'm super pumped for. But mate, you said you've been, and you are very passionate about the whole economic sort of perhaps scene, or you could call it a shit show in Argentina. I think that's a great place to start. You've been, tell me about it. What was it like being there? And then segue into the whole economy part too.
Okay, actually, I haven't been to Argentina myself, though I have a lot of friends from there.
Gotcha.
Wonderful people. But, what immediately came to mind is just the economy in Argentina. As you know, I grew up in Greece, and it's funny, but while I was at MIT, right around the time when we're starting Algorand, it was maybe 1 or 2 years after the financial crisis in Greece, right? And, Greece always had a banking system. Everything was working fine until it wasn't.
Exactly.
Right? One day, the banks realized, everyone was just looking for the money. Everyone was like, where's the money? They decided to freeze everyone's account. I remember it was impossible to get, more than a few, maybe it was like even up to a few $100s per month. But it was very tight, right? Like, imagine like you have a family of 4, right? And like that was across all all ATMs, banks. It was a very, very hard time. There were massive lines at the ATMs. At the banks, don't quote me on the numbers, but it was a very hard tough time in Greece, right? So, you have to take care of your family, your people, and it was people like that worked their whole lives to save some money, and then there was so much uncertainty. All the money was gone overnight, and this situation lasted for a while until there was a bailout, but there was no alternative, right? So when Silvio Micali, who was actually a professor at MIT, the founder of Algorand, and I met him when I took his class my first year. I remember I got the best grade in that class, so we ended up doing some research together. I guess he liked my research, and he was like, why don't you work with me on this new project called Algorand? We're working to make a better Bitcoin. I'm like, what's Bitcoin? I don't really know much about it. Back in the day, they gave everyone at MIT, I remember, was it 1 Bitcoin or like half a Bitcoin or something like that?
They gave you... Come on.
Yeah, every student at MIT. Yeah, when it was like very, very cheap, right?
Wow.
It was super cheap. So they gave everyone it was probably like half or 1 Bitcoin. I don't remember exactly. And I remember all my friends, they just spent it. I never even, knew how to claim it at the time. So I never did. It was not worth that much, to be honest. And, fast forward to today, we're like up
$70,000.
Yeah. It's quite a bit. But I remember explaining this new technology to my friends in the States, and everyone was like, okay, why do I need this? I have, Venmo, or I can use my Bank of America account. It's so easy, right? To transfer money. Why do I need to use Bitcoin or this technology? And I realized that, for a lot of people in the States, they just never experienced financial issues.
Yeah.
Why we have in a lot of the rest of the world. Like billions of people don't have access to the banking system. And I realized, okay, well, a lot of people are not thinking about that. It must be a good opportunity. There's obviously a need in a big part of the world for this technology. At the same time, the science behind blockchain is fascinating. It's like, combination of math, game theory, economics. Frankly, it was like a white space at the time. No one knew how to design those things. And myself personally, I'm good at problem solving. I like to solve problems where, you can start from nothing and like just build up a whole category. That's what I enjoy doing. And so it was fascinating technical problem. Obviously, like there was a big need in the world to give access to sound money to billions of people. And that's how I decided to join Silvio and work on Algorand, which was not even a project at the time. Right? It was an academic paper Silvio and my co-founder now at Axelar, Sergey, had written, and we worked on it for a couple of years until we actually launched it as a company and launched one of the first proof-of-stake blockchains in the space.
That's so cool. So you've had it sounds like you had a pretty cool mentor and a brilliant mentor to really walk you through this whole thing as well. Any interesting stories from the early days of Algorand? Because Algorand is still, obviously one of the behemoths of the space as well, but really one of the first companies to really make a lot of waves, move and groove, and was one of the most famous ones. Any really good stories, maybe one or two in particular that, you would tell at a fireside chat that get the people going?
Honestly, yeah, I'm not sure what I'm supposed to say, but it was a lot of fun. Honestly, I would just work with Silvio out of his house every day. It felt like a real startup. There was no office, literally like the house. Yeah. For me personally, it was a tough time because I remember I was graduating and then I had to like extend my stay in the States. And I was like, we had to raise money. And, in the US, when you graduate from a STEM degree, you can apply for an OPT, which can last up to 3 years, but you need to have it, right? So I was like, well, do I go into finance or some of these other things that math and computer science students out of MIT do? Really, if you're like a computer science student out of MIT and you like math, the two options are either finance or you go to some big software company, or you do a startup, which for me was like just out of the question at the time. I knew nothing about business. I wasn't even thinking about it. But Silvio was like, okay, we're going to try to raise money. And surprisingly, in retrospect, but it took so long at the time, right? Because no one even like understood the technology. No one believed in the technology. Ethereum had recently done its ICO, but it was still not valued that high. It was just before the big, like, I guess, massive pump of the market in like 2018. So no one was investing at the time.
Yeah.
So it took a while to raise funds. And I remember it was like maybe a week or two before I would have to like leave the country that we actually like managed to get approval, right? Like I could get my paper. So it was like very, very border.
You were almost getting deported.
But, yeah, we had an amazing time building Algorand, and the initial team was like 10 engineers out of MIT, technical team that cared about the product, did some very cool innovations in proof of stake. At the time, my co-founder Sergey also did something pretty cool. He led the standardization group of BLS signatures, which is now the standard for Ethereum consensus, or the Ethereum validator to secure proof of stake network. They use BLS signatures, right? And Sergey standardized that among other cool things he's done. So, and my consensus protocol that secured the Algorand consensus, right? So we both done pretty fundamental technical work in the space.
That's so cool. And I'd love to go back to Argentina and sort of the whole world. And I told you I'm from Toronto, you've been to Toronto as well. We'll get into that later at the end of the show, but I'd love to jump into Axelar for a second. Why, you had such incredible experience, built so many cool, innovative products and services at Algo. And then you and a couple of people from the team, I believe, decided to start Axelar. What was the need for that? And did you know sort of when you were starting it that present day Web3, present day blockchain, crypto would really need this sort of full stack interoperability layer? Because, a couple of years ago it was like, well, maybe there will be a couple blockchains that really run the show and we won't need this full stack. But now, present day, we really know that cross-chain communications, interoperability, it's still so important. And it really needs to happen. So I'd love to know like the whole founding story of why you guys started Axelar.
Yeah, for us back in the day, we worked on a new blockchain that was a non-EVM blockchain. And it became very clear early on that you need a simple way to onboard users. Especially at the time, all of the liquidity was in DeFi on the Ethereum side. And what's an easy way to onboard users? Well, you can build a bridge. With Ethereum, you can build a bridge to Bitcoin. People can bring over those assets and do interesting things with them. But then we're like, well, why not solve this problem for the wider ecosystem, right? We had very high conviction that there's going to be multiple different VMs. There's going to be blockchains specializing for different use cases, even for the simple reason at the time that we did not expect that a single blockchain will scale, right? And we're seeing that, even Ethereum, there's like so many different layer twos. No single layer two can scale by itself. Solana is more scalable, but again, I think as more and more adoption comes on chain, especially with AI agents now, right? Who knows how much volume those things are going to generate. I just don't see a future where, from a technical perspective, we can scale to satisfy that demand. But also, it doesn't make sense to necessarily have everything on a single chain, right? There's a lot of different forces that motivate teams to launch their own chain, right? Maybe you want to have your own gas token and capture some value on the infrastructure layer, so why parent to someone else? So we always had very high conviction that this is the future. We have kind of a meme that we say that 1 million chains. I don't know if we'll hit 1 million chains, but it's definitely possible. Again, especially with AI agents, I have very high conviction that the biggest user of the chain is not going to be individual people themselves. It's going to be the AI agents that on their behalf, right? And they can make payments to each other. They can do all kinds of other things. And in that future, who knows? Right? Maybe even each human can have their own blockchain that's customized for their private needs. Maybe they have their own privacy settings, right? We can even envision a future where every human has their own blockchain. And then when you want to communicate with someone else, you send money to their blockchain, right? Or something like that.
Interesting. Wait a second. So how would that work though? If every single human had a blockchain, why would that? And this is way out of my pay grade here, but why? And perhaps would that be more efficient than just using the current blockchains that are available?
Well, let's say, and that's an assumption, right? I'm not saying this is necessarily going to happen, but I can definitely see a future where just because it's so much easier to customize your own chain, maybe you create your own custom L2 that has certain privacy features that are to you, right? And your personal preferences. And, you do certain transactions to that chain that you don't want anyone else to see, or you only want certain people to see. So that's one example.
Interesting. Very, very cool.
Again, that assumes that it's so easy to launch a chain and it's so easy to communicate between chains, right? Because in that world, why share block space with someone else, right? So it's also a question of why not? If we make it so easy to launch a chain and interoperate across chains, I think it becomes a question of why not this future rather than a why.
100%. Next thing I'd love to get into is really just sort of the importance of cross-chain, everything cross-chain bridges. And just for a quick little table setter for the listeners at home, the reason why cross-chain is exactly what it sounds like. If you're on one chain, if you're on ETH and you want to talk to another chain, or if you're on Sol and you want to talk to another chain, if you're on TON, which you guys just had a huge partnership with, I believe you guys became the first cross-chain bridge on TON. You really, you need an incredible, seamless, integrated, efficient, secure cross-chain bridge in order to move assets or really just speak from one chain to another. And with the increased amount of chains, this is an ever, more important issue. And there's a reason why tons of companies like Axelar, not quite as good as Axelar, as you guys are, one of the big dogs and one of the big leaders, but there's a reason why there are hundreds of really good crypto organizations who are in this space for that reason alone. But what goes into it? What are the things that are needed for a cross-chain bridge to really be more efficient? And I'd love if maybe we'll start with the issues and then talk about the solutions, if you will.
Yeah, so it really boils down to scalability and security. So if we just go back 5 years when we were ideating Axelar, back then you had all these centralized interoperability solutions where it's funny, a lot of them were claiming to be decentralized, and they even had some fake dashboards where they were showing validator sets. They were like, don't worry, it's all secure. None of them was open source, which is the biggest red flag immediately, but they were claiming they're decentralized. And inevitably what happened to the majority of them was that, they got hacked. How did they get hacked? Apparently it was the founder or a small group of people that were holding all the funds in a centralized key. Some attacker managed to get access to this key and they just siphoned all the funds. The most recent one was the multi-chain situation where, it's not clear exactly what happened there, but someone managed to take the funds. I don't think people still even know where those funds are. They lasted for 3 years, but eventually even multi-chain broke, right?
Yeah.
So centralization has been a big attack vector because this creates this honeypot for attackers. So with Axelar, the first thing was to solve this issue. And how do you solve a centralized honeypot? You create a decentralized solution, a decentralized validator set. And how do you create a decentralized validator set? You launch a blockchain. That's the best way we know how to do that, right? So the initial motivation for launching Axelar as a blockchain was that we want decentralization, so that today we have 75 validators, and you would need to corrupt the majority of these validators in order to steal the funds. And these are the biggest validators in the space, right? So the analogy I like to make is that if you can compromise the majority of the Axelar validator keys, you can probably compromise the majority of the Ethereum or Solana validator keys as well, right? So from a centralization perspective, it has similar properties to the chains it connects, and that's what we wanted to achieve day one.
Love that. It's again just such a big issue in crypto right now that we really need to continue to move and groove on. We are on a roll here, but we do need to take a quick break and give a huge shout out to our sponsor of the show. And when we get back, we are going to talk about RWAs and deepin and how they have a massive need for interoperability. And one thing that I absolutely love, which is the work you guys are doing in connecting on and off chain systems. Again, you got to connect Web 2 to Web 3, and that's exactly what you guys are doing. Until then, huge shout out to Prime XBT, longtime friends of CryptoNews.com and longtime sponsors of the Crypto News podcast. We love these guys as they offer a robust trading system for both beginners and professional traders. It doesn't matter if you're a rookie or a vet, you can easily design and customize your layouts and widgets to best fit your trading style. Prime XBT is also running an exclusive promo for listeners of the Crypto News podcast. Use the promo code CryptoNews50, that is CryptoNews50, all one word, to receive 50% of your deposit credited to your trading account. Again, that is CryptoNews50, all one word, to receive 50% of your deposit credited to your trading account. And now back to the show with Georgios. Georgios, mate, we got to talk about RWAs and deepin, one of the trendiest areas in crypto at the moment for good reason. Again, I'm very, very, I don't even want to say bullish because it's a bit of a cheesy word. Everyone talks about being bullish and bearish about certain trends and niches in the space. But I love how this actually has potential to really onboard a lot of Web 2 folks, whether it's deepin, whether it's RWAs, whether it's deepin and you're driving a car and you're getting micropayments for driving your car and giving that data back to the deepin provider, or whether it's RWAs and you are actually tokenizing real world assets. Two really important parts of mainstream Web 2 stuff that we really need to go to Web 3. So my question for you, mate, is how are you guys working on really helping creating cross-chain solutions for RWAs and deepin?
Awesome. Let me start with deepin. It's far from my expertise, right? And something we haven't really looked at from the Axelar side. But obviously, this is one of the most exciting blockchain verticals. I think it's super interesting how you can solve the cold start problem for a lot of these networks by providing incentives to people. But yeah, it's not something that I think not just Axelar, but any of the interoperability networks is deeply involved in. RWAs, of course, well, those assets want to be everywhere, right? And you may have seen some of the leaders in the space like, Hasnode or Ondo already using Axelar. The thesis there is simple, right? Same to USDC and USDT. Those assets, whether they're like regular stable coins or tokenized treasury bills where you can earn a yield on your stable coins, they want to be accessible everywhere, right? Because applications live on different chains, and so they want to be accessible to every user on every application. And now if you're a real-world asset builder, it's a lot of work to go and deploy on every different chain. It's already hard if there's many VM chains. Look at Circle, for example. Either on how many chains, like 10, maybe 15, and they're one of the biggest stable coins, right? With Axelar, you can literally deploy on the 69 chains that Axelar is on by doing a simple connection, right? It's we even have a front end where you can go, enter the address of your token, and deploy it on as many chains as you want. It's a no-code solution, right? So we make it really seamless to go on those chains.
Wow.
Why this is great for developers is because there is a big engineering overhead to integrate with all those networks, right? But from the Axelar side, we've already done the work, so you can spend way less time just redeploying your asset everywhere and focus your efforts on making your product better, right? And figuring out your go-to-market. So that's number one. But one of the main things that excite me about RWAs is tokenized treasuries, which is effectively the equivalent of Avens account. And this ties back to the integration that we're doing with Ton, right? So Ton is directly connected into the Telegram wallet. if you go to the Telegram wallet today, you can create a mini app that talks to the Ton blockchain. And there's a bunch of wallets there, right, that anyone with a Telegram app can access. Now imagine if we take all the tokenized RWAs from every other chain, right, Swiss, Solana, Ethereum, Ripple, and we create a bridge version of them on Ton. That implies that anyone with a wallet, anyone with a phone, right, could download Telegram and access a savings account on their phone, right? And I think this is transformative for, again, like developing countries where they don't have robust banking systems. As a user today, yes, maybe you can go and hold like USDT in the Telegram app today, but why get inflated away and not have access to a savings account? So this is the natural evolution of first banking everyone by giving them access to stablecoins, but as a second step, let's give a savings account to everyone in the world, right? And to me, if that's the only thing we do with crypto, I feel like we've succeeded, right? Of course, we're trying to do way more, but if there's one thing we do well, I'd love it to be that and just allow everyone in the world to have access not only to sound money, but also a savings account on top of that sound money.
That's massive. Oh, I absolutely love that. Let's jump into connecting on-chain and off-chain systems. And this is done, if I did my research correctly, to the interchain amplifier. It really just allows anyone to streamline on and off-chain integration with any blockchain using the smart contract layer and eliminating sort of protocol level headaches. And it's an absolute shit show right now, but you guys are doing God's work in this and making it much, much easier. I'd love if you could sort of explain that and just really, the overarching importance of actually creating a bridge for on-chain and off-chain systems.
Awesome. So a bit earlier, we talked about one of two Axelar's advantages. One is the decentralization. Still to this day, Axelar has been live for 3 years. It's the only decentralized interoperability platform in the space. And the second unique feature of Axelar is that it itself is a blockchain connecting blockchains. And that's also something that no other interoperability solution in the space has. And this has a couple of advantages. First of all, Axelar is a chain, and we create one-off connections to other chains. When a new chain is connected to Axelar, through the Axelar chain, you can route messages and assets to any other connected chains, right? So if you try to visualize it, instead of having to connect chains in a pairwise manner, right? Every chain gets a direct connection to every other chain. With Axelar, it's a single point of integration, and you get access to everything else, right? It's many-to-many connectivity versus pairwise connectivity. One scales quadratically, and in the Axelar's case, it scales linearly with a number of chains. Now, this is great from scalability because you only have to do the work once and you don't have to do it again. Connect the chain. It's great for security because if something breaks on a certain chain, the hub, the Axelar chain, can automatically detect that something went wrong on that chain and halt the connection effectively, right? Just contain the damage to that particular chain. Effectively, you can have a routing table on Axelar where it says, well, $10 have been moved to this chain, like $50 have been moved to this chain. So if there is some bug on the VM of one of those chains and someone manages to mint an infinite number of funds, which has happened more than once in the past, Axelar would only let them exit up to the amount that has moved over to that connection. While with pairwise connections, one connection cannot be aware of what has been moved to another connections, right? Because everything happens in a pairwise manner. You don't have a global accounting table. So if a chain breaks, every single other chain can be drained, right? And we expect to see a lot more of those VM bugs, especially with a lot of the non-EVMs, right? People experimenting with different things. And because we do have this advantage, it's going to be so much easier to scale Axelar to all of the non-EVMs, right? Because you can have the confidence that if something breaks, well, the damage is going to be contained to those particular assets, to those particular connections, right? So it provides a massive advantage for scalability and secure scalability on top of that.
I love that.
Now, another nice benefit of the hub and spoke architecture and the fact that Axelar is a blockchain is that you can have smart contracts on top of Axelar. Smart contracts on top of Axelar, which is the new Mobius upgrade that was launched very recently, imply that anyone can build their own connections to Axelar, right? So you can be like a chain issuer, you can go program your own connection to Axelar without talking to anyone, right? You don't even need governance approval, and then you will be able to route messages to any other chain in the ecosystem. And this makes Axelar a truly programmable interoperability layer, right? All interoperability layers to this day have been programmable to an extent because people can program cross-chain applications, but Axelar is the first where you can actually program your own connections to the chain. And you program a connection once, you get access to the whole ecosystem. So this has extremely powerful network effects.
That's wild. Yeah. I'm just, again, I absolutely love the work you guys are doing in the space. Last thing on Axelar, and then we will get into a couple other things here, mates. You guys have had some just absolutely key milestones and partnerships, collaborations with some absolute behemoth major institutions, Deutsche Bank, Citi, MasterCard, Northern Trust, also DeFi leaders, Lido, Uniswap, DYDX, who unfortunately let go a bunch of their team yesterday, but still nonetheless. And the latest partnership, which we discussed earlier on in the show, you guys became Ton's ecosystem cross-chain bridge provider. Huge, huge, huge. What's it like working with these big institutions, and maybe talk about some of the problems that they have and the solutions that, you guys are providing for them?
Well, it's we've been doing work with institutions since like back in the Algorand days, right? In fact, one of the early initiatives for Algorand, maybe like 6-7 years ago at this point, was doing work with central banks to bring CBDCs on chain. I think that was a bit too early for its time, but the concept remains, right, that everything is going to get tokenized. The way I personally like to think about crypto adoption is like any technology, right? If you look at any technology, the free market always removes inefficiencies, and the best technology on a long enough time frame will always dominate.
Yeah.
So to me, it's not a question of whether technology will be adopted, whether crypto technology will be adopted. It's like, what can we do to accelerate this adoption, right? That's the only question in my mind. It is inevitable. It will happen, right? So if you're an institution, you have to be ready for this to happen, right? Because you don't want to be disrupted. You don't want to be left behind. So it's really cool to finally see like an entity like the MAS just coordinating all the different institutions, right? Providing clarity, providing guidance. This is something that, to my knowledge, we haven't seen in any other jurisdiction in the world. So it looks like a lot of the progress and adoption is coming from the APAC side, and especially like out of Hong Kong, Singapore. We see a lot of growth in those jurisdictions. And that's precisely where we did our initiatives with JP Morgan last year. We did the proof of concept at Project Guardian, where they have their own chain, Onyx, and then there was another chain called Provenance, and they want to do a cross-chain swap, right? Which in their case, it's the equivalent of this transaction called delivery versus payment in traditional systems, but effectively it's like, how do we move assets across different blockchains, right? Or different banking entities have their own blockchain in this case, right? And in the Deutsche Bank instance, we're going to be announcing the details at Project Guardian, so not supposed to talk too much about that. But in general, it's all about transferring funds across chains. And if you want to be included in those initiatives, you need to have interoperability. Otherwise, you're completely siloed off from the rest of the ecosystem, from public chains. That's another thing. There is a lot of interest from these institutions to also have connectivity to the banking chain, to also have connectivity to the public chains, because we saw BlackRock, the biggest money manager in the world, tokenizing on a public chain, right? So it's definitely important for them to have both access to private and public chains, right? So back to your question about, connecting off-chain to on-chain, you can also think about some of these more permission ledgers as like being off-chain, right? Or run by institutions, run by consortiums. They definitely will need interoperability with public chains at some point as well. And Axelar's Mobius upgrade with a smart contract platform is great for this because it allows them to customize their connection to Axelar any way they want, permission it, like keep it private if they want, but then once a message lands on Axelar, it can be forwarded to any other chain, right? So this hub-and-spoke architecture allows banking institutions to have very granular control over who can access their chain and what information they pass back and forth.
I love that. Mate, we are getting a little tight for time here. A couple more questions and we will wrap up. Any other areas of crypto that get you excited at the moment? Obviously, present day, while we are recording, Bitcoin has touched above 70K. Things are looking pretty good. Looks like we're going to jump into a bull market again. I mean, knock on wood, we don't want to jinx it. Obviously, this isn't a price action podcast, but any other areas? I know we touched sort of RWAs and deepin a little. We've done a bunch on interoperability and cross-chain comms, connecting on and off-chain systems. Any other areas of crypto that really excite you present day?
I personally want to see more applications, less infrastructure.
Yes.
Right? The infra is at the right place at this point. But man, to be honest, like for me, as I said before, as long as we can get sound money in the hands of like everyone in the world and the savings account, that's an important primitive, we have succeeded. right? So that's why Axelar is doing a lot of work with these institutions, with RWAs, because we feel that this is really what we need to fulfill the promise of crypto, right? So if there's one thing, that's what I'm most excited about. I'm also very fascinated by the world of AI, how that will interface with crypto. There is a debate on how much AI will have to use crypto. It's definitely easier to do things on chain, especially if you're like a sovereign AI agent, which, is not tied to an individual, where you want to make your own actions on chain, maybe hold your own funds, then you absolutely will need to be on chain. But overall, it is much easier to do things on chain, right? Because your agent will be able to read the full history of the chain, make more informed decisions, right? While a lot of these institutions are a black box today, right? So it's hard to tell which direction this is gonna go. But definitely I'm fascinated by this world, and it's something like I'm personally gonna be spending a lot more time to understand the intersection of AI and crypto.
I love that. Georgios, what an episode. Really appreciate your time, my man. Before we let you go, can you please let our listeners know where they can find you personally and, of course, Axelar online and on socials?
Yeah, thank you so much for listening, everyone. Feel free to message me on Twitter. My DMs are open. And especially if you're a developer, you want to figure out how to go cross-chain. Even if you're too early, it's important to have a discussion in the early days so that you don't make any design decisions that hold you back to a single chain, right? You don't want to accumulate any technical debt. So we'd love to have a discussion and just scope out your implementation, even if your cross-chain roadmap is like 6 months to a year away, right? But definitely please reach out on Twitter, and happy to answer any questions, especially if you're a developer.
I love it. Folks, what an episode with Georgios Vlachos, co-founder of Axelar Protocol. What an episode. We touched everything in regards to seamlessly connecting blockchains, connecting on and off-chain systems, crypto in countries without robust banking systems, the early days of Algorand, how AI will impact crypto, and I love how he finished it off with how crypto needs more applications and less infrastructure. We have so much friggin' infra, but people don't care about infra. Obviously, infra is needed, but we have the infra. Let's start cranking out some consumer and even B2B applications so we can really find some more use cases and get that ball rolling. Huge shout out to Georgios and the team for making this happen. If you guys enjoyed this one, and I hope you did, please do subscribe. It would mean the world to my team and I. Speaking of the team, love you guys so much. Thank you for everything. And back to the listeners, love you guys. Keep on growing those bags and keep on staying healthy, wealthy, and happy. Appreciate you guys for listening as always. And we will see you on the next one. Bye for now.